This thing made me miss the launch of the Vive Cosmos. Alright, no, I'm just kidding. Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I am Mateo311, and today we're going to be comparing the Pimax 8kx versus the Valve Index. If you're not familiar with the Pimax 8kx, it's this super expensive and super high-end consumer headset that features dual 4K displays and a field of view that goes up to 200 degrees. It also comes with a whopping $1,300 price tag for the headset alone. So obviously I think it's a great opponent for my current favorite headset, the Valve Index. Now Pimax did send me this headset to test out. I'm using two separate computers, one with an RTX 3090 and the other one a GTX 2080 Ti. Obviously you need a high-end machine to run these displays. I'm going to break down this video into separate topics like comfort and fidelity. So whatever you're interested in, jump into the description, look for it, it should be there. But my main focus is to compare this and put it up against the Valve Index. So let's not waste any more time, guys, and jump right into that, starting with the comfort level. So the reason I start with comfort is because if a headset is uncomfortable, you're just not going to wear it for a long time, and then what's the point of buying it? So surprisingly, for such a huge headset, and it's quite heavy too, it doesn't feel bad on your face at all. Now I did throw this on the scale and it was almost 1,000 grams, but based on this strap and the overall size of it, the weight is distributed nicely and it doesn't feel that heavy on your head, and I can wear this for extended periods of time without feeling like neck strain or anything like that. It wasn't pulling me forward like the original Oculus Quest would. So overall, they did a good job there, especially with the bulk that they're dealing with. Now, where things start to go a little sideways is their choice of materials. This is a very high-end, expensive headset, and you get what you normally find in the Vive headsets, this foam around your face. This is not, it's comfortable on the skin, it provides a nice level of cushioning. However, it could be a little scratchy, and it is just a sweat and heat magnet. I was very happy when I stopped using my Vive and Vive Pro because I got away from this material. So for me, that is a huge con. The Valve Index has become my gold standard for comfort. Out of the 9 headsets that I've owned, it is the most comfortable, and it is a heavy headset also, but it just feels fantastic on your head. So you don't have to worry about sweat as much, and this will just turn, and this is the spare one, this would just turn into disgusting bacteria-ridden, I don't want to think about it. However, the cushioning back here is excellent. Feels really good on the back of your head. This is more of like a rubber material. Again, there's that foam I'm talking about. But this does hold in a lot of heat, so it's not my preference right there. So on a comfort standpoint, they've done a really good job, but it just doesn't compete with the Valve Index. And the Oculus Quest 2, I would say, is also more comfortable, but compared to the other headsets like the PlayStation and Rift S, I think it's either on par or, better. That is very subjective. We have different heads. We have different levels of when we're going to get fatigued or what bothers us. But overall, comfort is not bad. And of all the headsets I've ever used, it's up there. It's just not Valve Index quality. Okay, so let's move into visual fidelity, which is obviously the selling point of the 8kx. These are two insane 4K screens. I know they're marketed as 8K, but that's marketing jargon, which is nonsense. They're two 4K displays. Still, that's really high resolution compared to your average VR headset. They can now technically run up to 90 Hertz at 4K. I did install the beta firmware for this headset to allow that. You do need an RTX 3000 series card to take advantage of that. Again, you're going to need that amount of horsepower to get 4K displays running at 90 Hertz. Some of the lower end games, no problem. Surprisingly, A game like Half-Life Alyx is really well optimized, and with the 3090, I was around that 90 frames per second. So that was nice to see, and that's where the 8kx would shine if you're capable of running it in native mode at 90 hertz. 75 hertz, which is the default, which my 2080 Ti setup was only capable of running, is lackluster. There's pros and cons there. I played with this on multiple different games, some that I've been playing a lot lately, some that are old favorites. I'm trying to go broad spectrum and see where it really shines. Surprisingly, where it stood out the most and was hands down the best was Space Pirate Trainer. That increased FOV made the game so much easier to play because you're never losing track of the enemy. You don't have to keep doing this to kind of see where they are. Also, this display is listed as CLPL. It's a custom low persistence liquid display. I tried to get more specifics on it, but everything just brings me back to, Pimax information. So maybe I can't speak to the tech itself, but I can speak to my personal experience. And in a game like Space Pirate Trainer, where there's a lot of black, the contrast level was definitely better than the Valve Index. That right there definitely shined. Also, looking at my hands, looking at the enemies, it was just hands down a better experience. Now, my experience wasn't the same for every single game. It wasn't, I went into a game and I said, wow, this is hands down better than my Valve Index. Half-Life Alyx, which I almost completely replayed through, testing the Pimax 8kx, I kept switching between headsets, isn't actually a much better experience. I missed the 120 hertz or 144 hertz of my Valve Index. I definitely felt the difference. Some people, it might not make a difference. For me, it absolutely does. The overall fidelity wasn't, for whatever reason, I didn't notice it as much. And when it comes to the wider FOV, a lot of Half-Life Alyx is a corridor shooter. So you're not missing anything. There are some outdoor environments, especially in the beginning of the game, which I'll show on screen, where you can definitely see a lot more of the city. Like a lot more, and it's a lot closer to what to a real experience. However, at those increased FOV settings, because you can set this 4 different ways, everything from potato to small to normal to large. Large is excessive and the distortion gets crazy. I did the most of my gaming at normal, which I think is something around 150 degrees FOV, maybe it's a little bit bigger. And the distortion was minimal, but it's there, and it's a really nice trade-off. That's where Space Pirate Trainer really shines. But I noticed there is always distortion. Unless you set this headset to the lowest potato setting, you're always getting some form of distortion, and even when it's at potato, the edges become much more noticeable because they're not completely black, because that's not the end of the headset. So you can kind of see the grayed out rest of the panel. Slightly. The distortion you get used to, but let me try and describe what it's like. And I was always aware that I was looking through a lens. Unlike other VR headsets that you don't really know you're looking through a piece of plastic. It kind of blends. Yes, sometimes you get God rays or glare. The Index does that. Doesn't bother me that much, except when you're on a loading screen. This, like when you turn your head every once in a while, you hit it at the right angle and you're very aware that you're looking through a lens. The other major issue is this wobbling type effect. Now, this most likely happens because the headset, no matter how hard I tighten it on my head, will do this. It will wobble ever so slightly. Now, if you're playing competitive shooters like Hyperdash, my current favorite shooter, which I did try out on this game, it's really frustrating. And yes, you will adjust to it, but it's got this, I'll try and make an animation to show you guys what it's like, but it's got this warping wobble effect that the whole world kind of shifts and distorts. And that's partially because of the lens, and that's partially because your headset itself is wobbling. Now, if you have a much bigger noggin, maybe that won't happen to you, but it was really frustrating, and it was to the point where many titles I actually would prefer to use my index. Even though after using this for a long time and I put my index back on, I noticed the color difference for sure. Again, it's game dependent. Half-Life Alyx, I think, arguably looks just as good. Now, when it comes to visual settings, Pimax actually has something that the Valve Index doesn't, and that's part of their PyTool software. It gives you the ability to adjust things like color, so you can do color correction. You can change the FOV per game. So you have a lot more tweaking options. So if you're that type of person, you want to tweak, you want to dial in the best experience, PyTool is going to let you do that. For me, I'd rather just go. I just want to jump into the game. I leave that to developers. They, work with a bunch of different hardware and try and get it the best. I just want to get in. I want to spend more time gaming and less time tweaking. But if that's your style, this gives you something on a visual standpoint that you're not going to get anywhere else. So it's lots of options. And visual fidelity sometimes really shines above and beyond the Valve Index. Now, audio on the other hand, my Pimax was sent this is the headphone version, which actually I'm using them like off ear right now because I cannot stand lots of contact. I feel when I wear the headset and then headphones, my head gets too hot. I just feel like almost claustrophobic and whatever. But these just slide on and they become headphones just like the Vive Pro or the deluxe audio strap from Vive. So you get headphones like that. Unfortunately though, the audio quality is complete garbage compared to the Valve Index. And that's not an overstatement. There's no bass in this. It's pretty tinny. I'm probably not the best person to, compare audio, but it's night and day. Now, it's not in audio strap Oculus, Oculus Quest 2 level, but it leaves a lot to be desired. And again, super expensive headset. So I expect more there. The microphone quality, well, let's do a microphone test right now, and you tell me what sounds better to you. Okay, so this is an audio test with the Pimax 8kx. So, audio check, mic 1, 2, mic 1, 2. We'll see how it sounds. Okay, so this is an audio test from the Valve Index. Let's see how they compare. So I adjusted audio levels just to give a more fair comparison, but you can hear the mic on this is also pretty terrible. It's just sad because you're aiming for the most high-end headset and you get really lacking headphones and microphone quality. You get an almost unbeatable screen and you get a lot of tweaking power, but then you lose out when it comes to audio. Just another personal observation, their site lists the IPD adjustment as 55 to 75 millimeters. However, I couldn't get mine lower than 60. You can adjust the offset in the software, which I did play around with too. Personally, I set my IPD to 58 on my Valve Index because I'm a Cyclops. But at 60, this felt okay. I didn't feel cross-eyed. I don't think it was really messing with my visual experience much at all. The software-based offset, I didn't see a huge difference because, again, it was pretty much dialed in for me. When it comes to the sweet spot, it wasn't that hard to stay in. The strap made it a little bit hard for me. I had to position it on my head to the point where, like, the nose guard was kind of jamming into me. There is a nice blackout nose guard, by the way. But, compared to some other headsets I've used, like the Vive Cosmos, that's a very small sweet spot that's hard to stay in. This has got a pretty good sweet spot, which obviously helps with the visuals. So when it comes to audio fidelity, the Valve Index obviously wins. And when it comes to visual fidelity, if you're willing to take the time to tinker, the Pimax wins. Also, if you have the hardware capable of running this at 90 hertz consistently. Now, when I say if you take the time to tinker, some games aren't optimized as well, so if you run them at 4K, native resolution here at the highest or higher FOV settings, the frame rate is going to be horrendous. So you'd either lower it or change some in-game settings or whatever to maximize the best experience, but you're gonna have to tinker along the way. So this one, if you play with it, can give you a better experience. Now, there is also an upscale mode, which I haven't really talked about yet. You can set this instead of 4K to 1440p, and then it will upscale to make it look like 4K resolution. But my experience with the upscale setting was very poor for whatever reason. It runs at 114 hertz, which is an odd number. And for whatever reason, I just saw so much more distortion. That wobble effect I mentioned, it just didn't, didn't look the way it should, in my personal opinion. I reached out to Pimax regarding this, and they just said, we recommend you run it in native mode. So if they know upscale doesn't work great and they're working on it, I don't know, whatever the case may be, but my experience in upscale mode was not very positive. I wouldn't say the screen flickers, but it almost felt that way. It was slightly off. Distortions were much more obvious, and I didn't really use upscale mode much at all. So if you have some lower end hardware and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'll just run an upscale mode, I would recommend against that. Now, I do also need to mention features. Out of the box, we're just looking for a headset that works, but it is nice to get a little bit extra for your money. Speaking of money, we're going to be comparing this for $500 versus the 8kx for $1,300. Now you might be saying, no, this package is $1,000. But the 8kx comes alone for $1,300. So it's $500 versus $1,300. And the Valve Index gives you some nice little extra features. You have these front cameras that probably the average user doesn't use, but I have VR house parties. I do like to flick them on with a key so I can see what's going on in the room. Makes life a little bit easier. I also use them when I stream sometimes to show off my hands or just show people the room. So they're just nice to have. You're paying a lot of money. It's good to have features. You'll also have the front trunk of the Valve Index, which I have a dopey display on right now. Kind of pointless. Maybe we'll plug in a face tracking module one day or something like that, but it's kind of pointless. I use a fan in there in the summer, but it's good to have options, especially if you're paying a lot of money. So out of the box, the Valve Index gives you just a much better package. And there's one major feature that I actually missed, which is the cable. The first thing I noticed is the cable on the Pimax 8kx is much shorter. Now we're talking 1 to 2 meters shorter. I was already about a meter shorter without the breakaway cable that the Valve Index has. So the Pimax has no breakaway cable, and it's up to 2 meters shorter, which is huge. And in this large play space, I actually couldn't record where I normally record. So I have a camera in that location, and that's my dead center. And if I use the Pimax, I'm already out of slack standing in that area. And you saw how much extra cable I had. I reached out to Pimax regarding this, and they said, well, we sell a fiber optic extension cable. I already paid $1,300. Well, I personally didn't, but someone may have spent $1,300. They don't want to then also buy an extension cable. Another missing feature that was huge for me and a bit of a frustration is the 8kx, for whatever reason, lacks a Bluetooth module. So I had no way of controlling my base stations. I plugged in the Pimax, set up all the software, went to play, and noticed I can't turn on my base stations. Had to plug my trusty Index back in, turn on my base stations, turn off power management, and then I can use my headset. When I reached out to Pimax regarding this, they said, yeah, just buy a Bluetooth adapter for your computer. So you see where we're going here. Obviously, it's not a great value. So if we're checking the scorecard here, guys, the Valve Index is a much better value, has much better audio fidelity and microphone, has some extra features that you may or may not miss. When it comes to visual quality, I think the Pimax can definitely exceed it if you're willing to tweak. So point there to the Pimax 8kx. And then when it comes to comfort, this is my gold standard for comfort, and nothing's been able to compete with it. Not even the Pimax 8kx. It has too much of a wobble. The weight is distributed nicely, and it also has that type of material, that foam material that is going to get super sweaty and hot and scratchy on your face. So it looks like the Valve Index, which is approaching 2 years old now, is still my personal favorite headset. But don't go anywhere, because we have to talk about all the software issues I had with Pimax. Now, I was able to resolve all of them, and this might be another major selling point or non-buying point for some people, but I felt like the tech support I was getting wasn't fantastic. And again, I'm starting with two perfectly good working machines. One is my 9900K RTX 3090 daily driver. I use my Valve Index almost every single day, and out of the box, plugging the Pimax in, I had tons of tracking issues, which makes no sense because this is base station tracking. The controllers were just going insane, and this might be a me specific issue, and after a Pimax update and the firmware update, things settled down, but I only saw this in upscale mode, and I think it's a bandwidth issue with my video card. Between a 4K display and then a 1440p ultra wide 240 hertz display, and then trying to run the Pimax at 114 hertz, I think I was running into a bandwidth issue, and it was just driving my machine nuts, because after the updates and then shutting off the extra displays and trying to see it, that settled down. But that was a frustrating first experience. Now, moving over to the second computer, it refused to work for an extended period of time. It just kept saying no display connected, and I tried every single display port and every single USB port, which, by the way, you need two for the Pimax 8kx. It requires two USB ports, and in my scarcity-driven USB world, that wasn't happy. I just randomly unplugged something. So, I had a lot of frustration on the second machine. It just refused to detect the display. Pimax sent me a generic sheet of troubleshooting, and there was only three options. Try a different port for your display port, try a different USB port, or reinstall your drivers. Now, my drivers were just updated prior to this. The Rift S was working prior to this on this machine, but I said, what the hell, we'll do it. And sure enough, it detected the headset after that. So that's just a little extra level of frustration. Now, room setup was also a nightmare on both PCs. For whatever reason, Pimax will say, okay, set up your room. It's very similar to the room setup that you do for Steam VR, which you still need to do anyway. But it seemed like they were conflicting with each other. The Pimax one kept setting my headset, like putting me in the ground. And I probably, between the two machines, ended up running room setup about 15 times. And then, oddly enough, eventually it took and things worked. But there was a Pi Tools upgrade in between my week of troubleshooting, and I did a firmware upgrade in between my week of troubleshooting. But again, room setup would just kept asking me to do it on one machine. Just kept asking, and I was in the ground until I did the Steam room setup, which you have to do anyway. So room setup was okay on one machine. On the other machine, it was insane. It was just crazy. It kept putting me, it like couldn't understand my room. And then again, after the Pimax update, it figured its stuff out. It was a very poor introduction, and it was like 3 total days of troubleshooting to get it working right on both machines. So that's my overall experience, and there's a clear winner here, guys. It is this bad boy. It's my Valve Index. I honestly would love an upgrade. I was super stoked to try out the Pimax. I've always been curious about the headsets. But at the end of the day, this guy is still the best overall experience. And please, someone make something that can compete with this so I can upgrade. Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, consider subscribing. If you have any questions, I'm sure I didn't answer a bunch of questions. I missed a couple things. This is the rambling of Matt's inner brain. If you have questions, put them down in the comments. I will answer every single one of them. And I will see you guys on next time.